Baltimore City Council Budget and Appropriations Committee. We are here for fiscal year 2020 budget hearings for the Workforce Development Panel. My name is Eric Costello. I'm the councilman from the 11th District and chairman of the committee. To my immediate left is Councilman Leon Pinkett, 7th District, vice chair of the committee. Council President Brandon Scott. We're also joined by Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District, Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District, Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District, Councilman Zeke Cohen, 1st District. We are also joined by Michael Huber, Chief of Staff to Council President Scott, as well as Kimberly Rubens and Rebecca Tabb from Council President Scott's office. We have Jeff Amoros representing Mayor Jack Young. Jeff, what request number are we up to? 64? 67. Close enough for government, right? We are here for the Workforce Development Panel. Bob, how many slides do we have for this one?
We've got all three.
Oh, watch your step.
We've got all the workforce slides, so 4, 5, and then MOHS, just the one for wage. So total of 9, I think.
Okay, let's start with Jason and Moed. Jason, if you could keep your presentation to about 10 minutes or so, and then I'll ask the other two agencies to keep theirs at around 2 to 3 minutes.
Sure.
I know that this is an important topic to the City Council, and most of our folks kind of have an idea of their questions and where they're going. So, Jason, please take it away.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening, Committee Chair, Council President, other members of the Council. My name is Jason Perkins Cohen. I'm the Director of the Mayor's Office of Employment Development. And with me tonight is Terry Parker, our CFO, David Hagans, our Budget Director, and Patty Morphy, who heads our Data Division. Just as a reminder, mostly for other folks, tonight we'll only be talking about our adult services. We talked about our youth services, including YouthWorks and Youth Opportunity on Monday. Okay, so I'm going to dive right in with service number 792. This is workforce services for TANF recipients. In Maryland, we refer to them as TCA, temporary cash assistance. This is a grant we have from the state for a little over $3 million. The reason the numbers fluctuate from year to year is based on the contracts. We have a new contract every year or every other year, depending on what they want to do, that determines the number of people we serve and how much money we receive. And we are the largest grantee in the city of Baltimore. Those services are provided at the Workforce Reception Center on 23rd Street, and we offered about 1,100 or 1,200 resident services last year. Moving on. 793 describes the number of residents who acquire 21st century skills at one of our centers. And the number of people who receive jobs or get jobs through our centers. You'll notice that the numbers increased significantly between 2015 and 2018, 2.5 times in terms of the numbers who receive 21st century schools, and about a 50% bump in terms of the number of people who get a job. Going to keep it moving. This is just MOED administration. This reflects the small number of people that are part of our administrative team, including director level individuals. It also includes staff one staff person who moved from DHR to MOED. What was Work Baltimore, we're doing it a bit differently now through recruitment events. I can talk more about that if you have questions. Keeping it moving. 795. This is called Workforce Services for Baltimore Residents, but of course, everything I'm talking about is Workforce Services for Baltimore Residents. This is our federal grant, WIOA, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Again, on Monday, I talked to you about that grant on the youth side. This is for our adult services. This is a major driver in what we provided at our 2 one-stop centers or American Job Centers. As you know, we have one at Mondawmin. We have one on Madison Street. And as you can see, they serve a whole lot of people. So last year, just about 30,000 residents, that's an unduplicated count, came through one of our career centers. And that number has mostly stayed stable. It was a little bit higher the year before, but very in line with where we've been. Okay. And then in terms of, again, we do survey our residents to make sure that they are receiving the services that they need, and we're reviewed very positively. The next account is 796. This is workforce services for ex-offenders or people returning citizens is probably the term we should change the title to. As you know, part of the Mandalman Center is a rec center or a reentry center. It's unique in the country. There are very few reentry centers, and Baltimore has one of them. The services are critical. We do serve people who have a criminal background at any of our centers. So it doesn't mean that if you have a background, you have to go to Mandalman, nor does it mean that if you have a background, if you don't have a background, you can't go to Mandalman. All of our centers will serve anybody, but we do have specialized services at Mandalman as part of the reentry center. Boy, my eyes are really. And we provided services to nearly 2,000 residents last year. I will just touch on, because you're likely to ask about it, why the number went down. We had a grant from the state called Prison to One Stop, and the grant was so successful that the state took it away and had the individuals, instead of focusing on Baltimore, they now focus on every jurisdiction across the state. So, that's what they decided to do. That was a grant that they owned. We still get some benefit from it, but it does account for part of the reason why the numbers have slipped a bit in terms of the total number of services. And then the last account is 806, and this is really the mobile unit, the mobile workforce center that got on the road in the last quarter of the year last year. As you recall, the center itself was paid for from a donation made to the city, but the city supports staff people to be on the workforce center and offer services to residents. So the numbers that are low are because it was only one quarter of the year. And that's my presentation.
Thank you. Who's next?
Thank you. Good evening, Community Chair Costello and members of the council. My name is Lori Cunningham. I serve as the director of the Community Action Partnership Program under the Mayor's Office of Human Services, and our account is service number 741. Our program focuses on poverty reduction efforts for low-income individuals across the city with a focus on housing and energy, financial literacy. We will be doing a rental assistance program, which I'll talk a little bit more about, and utility and security. So most of our funding is from the Community Service Block Grant Fund. We also receive funding from CDBG and the General Fund. This year, we can see a decrease in our energy assistance. I wanted to point out that is due to the Baltimore Energy Initiative, which was a part of the Customer Investment Fund, where the city received about $30 million for the program. Since that program has ended, that has caused a decrease in the number of people that we're able to serve because there was also a reduction in staff. But we would also see that the Office of Home Energy Program has infused our funding by about $3 million to focus additional efforts on expanding our energy assistance program and making sure that we are able to reduce that utility and security gap across the city. So for our rental assistance program this year, I wanted to point out that we have about $300,000 that we will be utilizing to decrease homelessness and opportunities to increase the opportunities for housing stability for residents. We will be doing a launch June 27th at Morgan State University, where our goal is to serve 100 families to ensure that they are able to pay their rental arrears, as well as to be able to assist some residents with rehousing. In addition, with our financial literacy program, we have for the third year our program for youth at Morgan State University. Well, we'll bring about 700 youth over the months of June and July to receive College 101 experience. They'll meet with administrators and teachers as well as students from the university, learn how to apply for college, as well as learn how to save funds and apply for scholarship opportunities. And we also will teach financial literacy to them. In addition, we just wrapped up our provider program. We got our stats last night. We have been able to bring more than $2 million to low-income residents through Baltimore City through our VITA program, which provides free tax preparation. We were the third highest in the state with an average savings of almost $350,000. And of course, that's money that goes right back into the local economy. Thank you.
Last one.
Excuse me, I left my glasses. 6:50. All right. Good afternoon, Council President, Council members. Thank you for allowing the Office of Civil Rights and Wage Enforcement to speak today on our allocated budget, proposed allocated budget. I'm Darnell Ingram, the Director for the Office of Civil Rights and Wage Enforcement. To begin with, we're starting with service number 656, which is the Mayor's Commission on Disabilities, which is the Wage Commission, which is also inclusive of the Mayor's Commission on Disabilities. And the purpose of this commission is to really enforce ADA noncompliance in the city and programming with persons with disabilities. About 16% of our population in Baltimore City are persons with disabilities, and so this is a major demographic in our city that we are trying to support here with the office. And with that, and the Wage Commission, where we also investigate wage theft, and also wage violations from city contracts, as well as the displacement worker bill that was just recently passed last year, as well as Council Bill 180297, where we investigate tax increment financing projects over $10 million. So with that, our actual restitution penalties assessed from FY18 was $226,000, and FY19 we had a target of $131,000, but however we have met and reached that target. However, one thing to be in mind about Wage Commission is that a lot of these fines and restitutions are subject to litigation, so we may have awarded it, but pending litigation, that's when the city will realize its penalties assessed against the contractors. And we are actually on target to increase our enforcement. We have augmented our staff. We've actually recently just been awarded 2 temporary wage enforcer investigators on a contract basis, so we can build capacity to do more enforcement in the city, and we're excited about that. The next one is service number 846, which is the Community Relations Commission. And this is a commission where we investigate unlawful discrimination in the areas of employment, housing, public accommodation, education, health and welfare occurring in Baltimore City. And we're also here to promote availability of quality jobs, existing a fair and inclusive workforce through the enforcement of Article 4 of the Baltimore City Code. This budget also includes our philanthropic activities, where we were trying to seek more revenue to build the capacity. As we are well aware, this office is sometimes underfunded, so we've received a contract with the ELC for $65,000. We receive that every year based on the number of complaints we investigate for employment. And recently, we just received a $101,000 contract from HUD to do outreach, education outreach to those who may be subject to unfair housing practices, as well as educate housing providers to ensure that they do not violate the Federal Fair Housing Act. And so we will be looking to seek more funds through philanthropic support due to the progressiveness of the legislation that we're occurring in the city, particularly a couple of bills that have been passed, as well as some that's looming in the horizon. So we'll be looking to get more support through philanthropic support from partners and collaborators around the area. And lastly is service number 848. I guess it's not up.
Sorry. We only included the ones that had workforce development.
Okay. And that'll be it for my presentations. If there are any questions.
Thank you. Jason, were you We'll go to President Scott first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Director, thank you for being here, and thank you for all the hard work that all your folks do each and every day. And anecdotally, I'll give you a story. I was pulling up at City Hall last Wednesday before the Board of Estimates, and I bumped into a gentleman who works for Rec and Parks who was out there helping to plant flowers and do some gardening. And he came up to me and said, "Mr. Scott, I just want to say thank you." And I said, "Well, thank you for what?" He says to me, sometime last year, I emailed you, and the Office of Employment Direct MOED called me, and then I got this job. And then, you know, he said this job really saved him. So just want to give you that and say thank you. And to that note, you know that the favorite service of mine from your agency is Yo and the Yo Academy. As a Yo alumni, I want to just ask you, because I know of the important work there, when you look at that service, it's on page 148 of volume 2, there are only 2 positions, right, budgeted for that service, and they served 137 students. That's a lot for just 2 people. Do you think that the students are receiving all of the support they could through this model, or do you believe that this model should be expanded? And also, how many more young people could we reach through Yo who are in desperate need if we were able to expand it? Because it's been 2 Yo centers since I was 14 years old.
Am I okay to answer here, or do you want me to go to the podium? Stay here. Okay. First of all, thank you for. It's always great to hear a story in which we were able to help someone get a job and get back on their feet. No, I think that, there's no question that we're only serving a fraction of the young people who need support, and they are, in many ways, our most vulnerable residents. They're between 18 and 24. That's who we serve. And the data is very clear that if you don't have a job and you're not engaged with education, you're at risk for every kind of negative outcome you could have. And so, in general, 2 centers are definitely not enough. You can only serve but so many people in those centers. Yo used to have a lot more resources. It used to be federally funded. This was quite a while ago, and most cities, when the federal money went away, they closed their centers down, and I'm very grateful, and I hope the people of Baltimore are grateful that the city has continued to support youth opportunity centers. But we definitely, we've got the one center that we run on Lafayette and Gilmore. We have the other center that we contract out with city resources to Hebcack on North Wolf Street. And those are vital, but there's huge areas of the city that are not being served that have lots of young youth opportunity residents. And certainly when it comes to jobs, I mean, you need a staff person to both talk to the residents, the youth, and find out what their skills are, and you need them to go out. I mean, if you're a job developer, you've got so many hours in the day, and you've got to be spending a lot of that out in the beating the bushes for job opportunities. So we don't have enough staff, and the city would benefit from additional centers.
Thank you. And just on that same area, what do you believe the gap is between what your department receives and what it would need to be fully funded and operational to support the needs of citizens throughout Baltimore, especially younger people and returning citizens in regards to employment?
So 2 points. One is, before I answer your question, I do want to just highlight something that we're doing, and we're meeting every Friday at our West Side Youth Opportunity Center, and we're trying to reimagine what a Yo Center would be in 2019 and beyond, and we're doing that with young people. And so we've formed a council, and we're asking them about soup to nuts, from the way the building looks, things that we can change, to the services that we're offering. We're changing the hours that we offer certain services because young people are saying that 8:30 or 9 a.m. may not be the best time to offer me a service, and so we're going to shift everything around based on their feedback. And I think and we don't have all of that information at this point. It's going to, it's going to take a few weeks or even a couple months to get all of that feedback back. The gap is really big. So we're touching about 900 young adults in a given year through our youth opportunity centers. There is data to say that there could be 16,000 opportunity youth in our city. So you're talking 7 or 8 times to try and serve all of them.
Thank you. Jason, if you could, and Mr. Amaros, if you can be prepared to type now, because this will help us. If you could provide a deeper dive into that data for 2 things. One, in the 900 that you touch, could you tell us just the general demographics, where they live, zip code, neighborhood, but also the interactions that those young people have had with the criminal justice system, and then break down further of those 16,000 opportunity youth, the same exact data.
Sure. Absolutely.
Thank you. And to follow up on that, Jason, do you know roughly how many returning citizens come home to Baltimore every year?
The number that I've heard used is 10,000. That's a number that's been out there for a few years. It's not our number, but I believe it comes from asking returning citizens when you're literally exiting. They're supposed to give an address of where they're going, and 10,000 is the number that's been used. So
thank you for that. And you guys, let's just say in fiscal 18, you assisted 1,952 of returning citizens to Baltimore. Can you first define what assistance means to Moet, and then I have some further questions.
Our reentry center will provide any assistance that's necessary. So certainly lots of residents come to us. We're an employment center, so lots of residents come to us for a job. But especially with the returning citizen population, they can come to us for other reasons. So at Mundalman, for example, we have the Office of Child Support is there, which is a really important support, particularly when you're leaving incarceration. If you have a child support order, it may not reflect your current status. You may have debt that is accrued that, quite honestly, you should not have accrued while you were incarcerated. Often they don't have an ID when they're released, though by law they're supposed to. It's a state law. We know that lots of them come to us and they don't have an ID. So whatever it is that they need, they're there to serve them, and we've added services. We work with the University of Maryland's expungement clinic, so we have them on site to offer expungement services. As you know, expungement, there's only certain things you can expunge, so that's somewhat limited. There was a second part to your question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Oh, I would just point out, though, that the reentry center is served roughly 2,000 residents last year, but our East Side Center and our other centers are serving people who have a criminal background. The challenge is we can ask someone, do you have a criminal background? Some will tell us, some don't want to tell us for obvious reasons. The reason it's different at the reentry center is because we actually have parole and probation on site, and they can actually go into their system and confirm the situation. We don't have them on site at our other centers.
And thank you. And Jason, can you tell me, when you are doing accounting, if someone gets more than one service at a center, do they get counted twice or they count as one?
No, they would only get counted once. Well, we can count the number of services, but that's not how the 1,900 or 2,000 number comes up.
So a couple follow-ups for that, and for you, pause for you 1 second, Mr. Director. Director Sinema, when you look at this, and I know this isn't you, but you're in charge of the budget, so to speak, so I have to talk to you right now. Their recommended fiscal recommendation for the general fund to work with X of vendors in Baltimore, for which 10,000 people will return to the city this year, is only $186,000. That's not even, we'll get nothing out of that. When we think about what we spend our dollars on, for example, we give the police department $1 million a year to have horses that no one on this God green earth knows exactly what we get out of those horses. We have to budget our budget better for the results that we want. We can see the results from what Jason and his group are doing. We have to rethink the way that we budget, and we have to think about how we can make that impact, especially for those. And I know that I've spoken to the director about even being more intentional about serving those people that are returning home, especially because we know that a good majority of them are coming home to Sandtown, right? And if allocated the resources to do that, he and his office could be working years in advance of them returning home to try to build these people up so that they don't go back to the things that they were doing that got them there in the first place. But we have to be forward thinking as a city to budget that way in order for us to get there. And I know you personally wouldn't mind seeing the horses go away, but I just had to say that for all intents. And Jason, what about a data sharing agreement? Could something be done for a data sharing agreement about that information to see if who you're actually serving and if they were?
Yeah, I mean, we would certainly welcome a data sharing agreement for adults and for youth. Both, I mean, we could take this far, but just to know if we're serving people who have a criminal background would be great. I would also love to know the impact of our services looking ahead. So if we, just making this up on the spot, but if we look back at, let's say, 2016, did recidivism get reduced because they received services from us or other city agencies? I would like to think would be very powerful information and would, if it was positive, which I like to think it would be, would make the case.
Thank you. I'm done for now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Oh,
Sure.
one thing, are there barriers to that? What's stopping you from doing that right now?
I think there would likely be some costs, as my guess. They typically, whether we do wage record matches or criminal matches with criminal justice, they charge us something. It wouldn't. I don't think it would be a lot of money, but it would be something.
Can we add that as a request, Mr. Amaros? Costs to building a data sharing agreement around backgrounds and other things for MOAD, especially around returning citizens. Thank you.
This is a direct follow-up.
Yes. So and this kind of goes back to what I was asking about the Innovation Fund the other day in terms of, do you need to already have the proof that helping returning citizens find employment and housing will have a direct impact on recidivism in order to get the Innovation Fund loan to expand the amount of services MOAD is allowed to provide? Or could we use that Innovation Fund to give them more money to do the pilot to see, like, if you actually put real money into that effort, we can have a significant enough impact that we could then perhaps reduce spending on police and approach public safety from a prevention as opposed to, try prevention instead of detention. Could we try that?
So, just to clarify, we have kind of two paths in the budget proposal process. The Innovation Fund has to pay back in terms of dollars so that we can recapitalize the funds, we can give out additional loans. So something like this would be more on the enhancement path. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Jason, were you impacted by the recent cybersecurity incident?
We're on a separate server.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, is there a reason why your team's email addresses don't show up in the global directory? Is it because you're on a different server?
I'm going to guess that's the case, but I don't know why. I hear that is the case, says Mike.
Okay. MOHS and Office of Civil Rights and Wage Enforcement. When were your offices first contacted about the cybersecurity incident by either the CIO or BSIT?
So I'm trying to recollect now what the first day was, but we were contacted immediately on the first day. Director Hickey was informed about it and let us know.
I echo the same statement. The day that all the mayor's cabinet representatives were informed, this is when this office was informed. I think it was around May 5th, May 6th, if I'm correct. The day of the day after the incident.
Got it. And were you given any guidance from the CIO or BSIT on what to do about email, whether you should create new email accounts or?
Yes. I believe we were informed to create temporary emails until the issue was resolved, which we did.
And an offer wasn't made to create those email addresses for you?
I can't recall, actually. I don't recall.
Okay.
For our office, no, but we are on 2 different servers. We're on HAPNet with housing as well as BSIT servers, so we've experienced outage with emails in the past, and so we reverted to our personal work emails and being able to utilize those, but there was not guidance from BSIT as far as creating an additional email address.
Got it. And Jason, do you have a disaster recovery plan or a continuity of operations plan at MOED?
I would have to check with my team. I'm not aware of one.
Okay. That's something that's going to be coming up during the cybersecurity and emergency preparedness hearings that Councilman Schleifer and I will be co-chairing. I would strongly encourage you to start thinking about that. It's not an expensive exercise, but it's something that will could save you a lot of money and heartache should you fall victim to what the city fell victim to. So,
Thank you. We'll look into it.
thank you.
Our office does have our continuity of operations plan. In fact, Director Hickey has provided guidance maybe 2 months or so prior to the attack to look at our COOP plan, and so we've already started working on
Can you
it.
bring Terry up?
Sure.
Terry here. Come on up. Grab a hot seat, Mr. Hickey. Or that's fine. Yeah, whatever's comfortable.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
So you have a COOP plan?
So we have an existing COOP plan that had not been renewed in several years. We started the process, like Director Cunningham said, 2 months before this. Coincidentally, we had started the process of fully renewing our COOP plan, had started with CAP, and we're moving on to our homeless shelters. So we are still in the process of finalizing the updated version.
Excellent. I would like to commend you. You're the first person that has said that to me this week. Although I wasn't, in all fairness, wasn't asking the COOP question to everyone, but I will be asking everyone moving forward. I did ask a few others. That is excellent.
If I could point out one of the things that was able to be beneficial to us, as I stated, that we're on 2 different networks. So according to our COOP plan, if any of the servers are down, if we don't have access to email, we are immediately supposed to shift our staff to the next closest center and then be able to provide laptops for those sites that do not have access to services. We serve about 30,000 households annually. Those folks are coming to us for critical needs such as energy assistance. If they are not able to get their energy assistance, they may lose their housing and end up becoming homeless. So it is important to us to ensure that we're able to provide those critical services right away. So we were able to regroup rather quickly and be able to redirect staff as well as customers to the other centers while still keeping the other centers that were impacted by the ransomware up at a limited operational level.
Excellent.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to amend, sorry, my team is telling me that we do have a disaster preparedness plan. I will make myself more personally aware of it, but there is one in place.
For the Office of Civil Rights, we actually created one due to this issue relatively quickly. We're required to have one through federal EOC. We're the EOC for the city of Baltimore, so there's a plan in place for that particular aspect of our office. However, we created a plan for holistically for the office due to the volume of complaints that come into our office. So we had to now create satellite offices for people to still do investigations and take in and do intake.
These are outstanding responses from each of these 3 agencies. You all should be very proud of yourselves for exercising this level of common sense. I really do appreciate it. Councilman Pinkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So for my first question is for Community Action Partnership. How you doing, Laurie?
Good, thank you.
So this for me, this is part of the budget hearing that feels like Groundhog Day. So can you tell me where the West Baltimore Community Action Center is?
So we have a satellite center that is at the Connections Point Church on Edmondson, but we presently do not have a center that operates on the west side.
So we have a pop-up, but no formal center.
Absolutely.
And so when was the last time we had a formal center?
We have not had a center on the west side for more than 6 to 7 years. The last location was the Pennsylvania Avenue location, and that one closed. We're not really sure why geographically that was the one that was chosen, but obviously it's left that area very vulnerable.
So is there money in this budget for a community action center for West Baltimore?
No, there's not money in the budget at this time.
So am I to assume that the residents of West Baltimore don't deserve a community action center?
We are really trying hard to be able to advocate for a center. As many of you are aware, we've done so in the past several years. It initially hit when we had the CSBG restructuring that caused us to lose about $1.3 million in funding, which we've been able to recoup in other areas. However, it is operations, and so it is very difficult to find an operating grant. So if it's not for the general fund to provide that to be able to pay for staff and structure, then no, we're not able to establish that office at this time.
And so to your knowledge, there's nothing in the charter that would preclude, us from having a community action center in West Baltimore.
No.
So if, Bob, if the mayor actually asked for resources for a community action center in West Baltimore and put it in the budget, you wouldn't deny him, would you?
So,
3 times before sunrise.
I mean, because at this point, next year will be the 7th year, and I'm just going to assume that somebody before me asked as well. I'm just going to keep asking every year until we get a community action center, some type of community center in West Baltimore. And while I appreciate the efforts with the pop-up center, that's inadequate because these centers provide resources. And a city that's challenged with transportation, with the city with all the challenges, these centers, are sometimes the first line of defense for people, for much needed resources, whether that be energy assistance, eviction prevention, you name it. And now it'll probably also be a center for issues related to water bills. And so I can't understand why it is so difficult to make certain that, we keep talking about equity. Why do we need an equity study to look at a map and find out that there's no resource like this in West Baltimore? Would we need a consultant to come tell us that?
yeah, so on the, to your first question particularly, we have, in this particular service, first looked to CSBG because that has historically been the funding source for this. So there was a period of time where we knew we were losing funding. It seems like there's more stability there. So when we've had issues in the service, we'll first looked to be, to see if we could be creative in CSBG to free up the money from that source, because it is an eligible source that we get from the federal government. And then only then will we look to the general fund to pick that up.
Yes, Lori.
So the Community Service Block Grant, Baltimore City receives the largest amount of funding from the Community Service Block Grant than any of the other counties across Maryland by quite a large amount. There's probably about a $500,000 to $600,000 gap. We are constantly facing the concern of losing CSBG funding because obviously it's authorized by the federal government. So it's been up for cuts several times. The CSBG money that we have is already going to staffing and for the existing buildings and for other operations. We don't have existing dollars that we are able to utilize for CSBG to be able to expand, and it's not going to happen. They're not going to increase funding for CSBG in the near future.
It's something, and maybe I'm just wrong in this, but it's something that I think I'm noticing the more and more I look at this budget, and I'm ashamed that I didn't notice it before. But it seems like the harder we work to get resources from the state or the federal government, the less we do as a city. And it really should be the opposite. It should be, we can augment some stuff with the state and federal, and it should allow for us to do more. Instead, what happens is we get so dependent on the state and feds, and then we do less. And we've got to get out of that mindset, or we will we won't make advances. The reason we get these resources are so we can make advances, not so that we can pull back and deploy resources somewhere else. And it goes from service to service. It's the same thing over and over again. My next question is, I want to make a comment before I ask my question, because to comment related to what Councilman Henry said. It's a shame that he would even have to ask about, helping ex-offenders is not innovative. And why would we, that's a basic, in this city, that should be a basic function of what we do because of the numbers of returning citizens that are coming to our community. And the fact that a councilman would feel so desperate that he would have to try to tap into an innovation fund for something that should be a basic service that we're providing as a local government is a shame. And we should be ashamed that we're even having that kind of conversation. When we know 10,000 people, and many of them are returning to West Baltimore. So myself, Councilman Bullock, Councilman Burnett, we're getting the lion's share of them. And then we're not providing the kind of resources that these individuals need. My main question was, are we prohibited from providing resources to individuals on the other side, pre-release?
Actually, the grant that the state took away from the city, Prison to One Stop, was we had staff people in the Mundalman Center who would actually go to the prison and talk to people in pre-release so that helped them develop a plan, which is exactly what we should be doing as they are released, so that they do have a plan and they can come to our center whatever day it makes the most sense for them.
And how much was that grant?
I'm going to have to. I'm hearing, as you can tell, about $250,000.
And it was really effective, wasn't it?
It was a very effective grant. Yeah.
And I'm not even going to ask you how many people it impacted. It's irrelevant. But the state took away $250,000. I didn't even know that's the perfect example. The state took away $250,000, and for a program that was so effective, we couldn't figure out how to find $250,000 and make certain it keeps going.
That's correct. And what they did was, still in their budget, but it's just not for Baltimore City. Now they travel the state, and they're serving people in Anne Arundel County and every other county. So,
thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilman, just to add on to your comments, there are actually DOJ grants out there to address this particular issue, and our office has been looking to it. It's just their expiration, we just found out about it, and there was this initial collaboration with to deal with recidivism for the youth in our cities, and we're trying to deal with mental illnesses with the youth to prevent recidivism as well as opioid abuse. The issue is having the resources to develop a proposal to apply for the grants and collaborate with other agencies. So we're looking at in our economic justice initiative to really figure out how do we collaborate better interagency to figure out what are some resources out there, because there are actually resources, just trying to figure out who should partner with and when and the timing of it. And so the one that we were trying to apply for was just timing just slipped away because of the whole ransomware attack. But there are actually grants DOJ is actually providing to municipalities in the nation. So we just got to be a little bit more diligent in identifying. No, and I appreciate that. I guess my point is that at what point will we make a decision that we're going to invest in the things that are most critical to the city? And I guess I was hoping that this might be the time, but when I look at this budget, it doesn't appear to be. I don't know who's next. Councilwoman Sneed.
Thank you. Jason, can you tell me, in reference to 1 day's work, 1 day's pay, where we are with that? Under Mayor Pugh, that project really, I felt, made a difference in my neighborhood with some of the seniors and the young people, just cleaning up the neighborhood and then engaging them. So I'm wondering if that program is still around.
That program, for better or worse, was not run out of our office. It was run out of an office with somewhere in the mayor's office, but we knew of it, but it wasn't ours, so I can't really answer that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for your service. Somewhat picking up off of where Councilman Pinkett left off, we continue to struggle mightily in this city with an underground economy, whether it's heroin or opioid distribution, whether it's squeegeeing. It continues to strike just about everyone in the city that we have young men and women that are participating in an economy that is not safe, that is not healthy, that is not good for anyone on any side of it. So kind of from a more macro lens, Jason, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how we are working to get some of the folks who are participating in either the drug trade or squeegeeing or whatever else out of that and into the kind of stable employment, life-sustaining wages. I guess what I'm asking is, I see with the Yo centers and the various centers, what would you say is sort of the overarching strategy for not just returning citizens, them as well, but the folks who are particularly caught up in this workforce where whether or not they're making more money than they would in, let's say, a minimum wage job, we know that the health risks are extremely high and the negative externalities are extremely high, and we continue to struggle with opioid deaths and everything else. And so what would you say is the strategy just from MOED on getting folks from that economy into a more stable living situation?
So I think there has to be at least a two-pronged strategy. First is to meet people where they are. For the most part, when people come to us, they are at some level of crisis, and they need an income immediately. And so we have to have a strategy to get them into a job as quickly as possible. There's lots of research to talk about labor force attachment, and the longer there's detachment, the harder it is to get back into the labor force, the more at risk people are for bad stuff. So first we have to meet them where we are, but in some cases, in many cases, the immediate job, the job that we can get someone so that they can earn a wage tomorrow, is not where they want to be. It's not going to provide the wage that they need, that their family needs. It's not what their aspiration is. So we need to have the immediate solution, and we need to have a long-term solution. And that long-term solution has to be around career pathways that lead to family-sustaining wages. And you have to do both, because in some cases, when you talk about a position that does offer family-sustaining wages, some people do qualify for it immediately, and we can move them towards that job, and we do every chance we get. Some people don't qualify for it immediately. They might not have the reading level, they might not have the educational credential, they might not have the occupational skill or credential. And so in that case, we have to build a citywide workforce development system that certainly includes the public sector, but we're not trying to do this on our own. And that's why we are really redoubling our efforts to create a true network where residents come into us and we are an access point. So that to the extent that someone comes to us and needs a job tomorrow, we'll have opportunities for them. But whether it's working and going to school at night, whether it's a different plan, whether it's part-time work while participating in training, we have to have these pathways, because virtually no one aspires to be a minimum wage worker. They might be open to taking that immediately because it's an income and it can help, but we have to have these long-term strategies. We have to be aiming at jobs that provide career pathways, and we've mapped them out in the major sectors of Baltimore that won't surprise you. It's healthcare, it's construction, it's hospitality and tourism. There is a pathway.
I guess just as a comment to Mr. Senemy, sort of to reiterate some of what's been said, when we look at the budget and we say to ourselves, we're not going to be able to police our way out of the various crises that we're facing, be it unemployment, be it violence, be it homelessness, and then we see the disproportionate spending that we're doing on one agency as opposed to the agency that potentially could support the 10,000-ish returning citizens per year, to me that is a misalignment of our values, because we can't keep saying we're not going to police our way out of all of our crises and then underfunding MOED, MOHS, civil rights. It just, again, feels deeply disproportionate. Thank you.
Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Perkins-Cohen, I had a couple questions about the Mobile Workforce Center. I was trying to find it in the budget book, but how many, what are the outcomes of that so far? How many folks have been placed in jobs since the inception of that program? I believe it was last fiscal year.
So in the last quarter of last year, 54 people were placed in a job. And then since that time, we have between 100 and 150 more people that have been placed in a job. I think realistically, I think what the Mobile Workforce Center truly is it's an access point. We have a calendar. I'm sure you've seen it. The unit goes to 2 sites each day, assuming that there's not terrible weather, and plants. It's not meant to drive around. It's meant to park in a place for half a day, basically. And we try and publicize that. We try and work with community partners. But for the most part, people, getting a job or applying for a job is not something you typically do in a couple minutes. So what I think the most beneficial piece of the Mobile Workforce Unit is people see it, they come up to it, they come on it, they talk to a staff person, and again, if they're willing to, we have 16 computers, desktops in the center, in the mobile center. We can certainly sit down with them and help them apply for jobs right there and then. In a lot of cases, that's not what they're ready to do in terms of their own plan for their day, and they will come to a center later on.
And how were the neighborhoods selected for the job center?
So we try and find a community partner, because again, we want to go to a high resident traffic location, and so, but to be honest with you, is trial and error, and so we're constantly open to tweaking it. If we go to a place and we find that, again, we don't judge it based on one day, but repeated attempts are just not getting much of a turnout, we will pick a different location. We've certainly worked with the council and are open to continue to hear from you about what locations in your district you think are going to have residents who are looking for work or looking for workforce services that are high traffic. So often we're going to shopping centers and things like that.
Yeah, no, I've seen it. It's been operational in my district, and I think two areas that I'm aware of, Edmondson Village and Irvington. Has to my colleague's point, Councilman Pinkett, is there a conversation between your agency? I mean, I'm with him on the lack of community action center, something that I know I've asked about in the last 2 budget cycles and off cycle about not a lack of a central resource center in my district at all. I mean, there are areas that, whether it's Connection Point or My Brother's Keeper, which has a MOED site inside of it, the 40 West Resource Center. I mean, these are spaces that are largely run by community-based organizations and really sort of volunteer-driven, with the exception of My Brother's Keeper, but not a lot of institutional support behind them. Which is an absolute travesty. That again, and I know you all advocate for these things, but the fact that they are continue to not be included in the budget, I would second. On the west side, has there been conversation about trying to supplement that lack of resource in a different way? So sort of trying to pile on when we know the workforce center is going to be there, and trying to coordinate with a community action center staff to be there, and just sort of to have a larger presence. Is that conversation happening between agencies so that there's more than just the job center, but maybe inviting the health department out to, because we know that barriers to employment are often complex and not just the ability to fill out an application, but it may be literacy, it may be drug treatment access. I mean, sort of that wraparound approach. Is that occurring when we are requesting resources like a workforce center to be moving around?
So I'll take the part about the Community Action Partnership Centers. MOHS and MOED have always worked very much hand in hand in trying to make sure that we can do the most with the resources that are existing. So from the beginning of the planning stages of the mobile workforce bus, we were working with MOED to figure out how we could be of assistance. At each of the MOED site visits for the workforce bus, Community Action Partnership staff is aboard the bus or meets at that location. In addition to supporting MOED with the job piece, we were also able to provide case management services and follow-up appointments. We talked to residents about energy assistance. We have more than enough people who need to get more energy assistance to be able to free up funds in their budget. So a lot of folks who are coming to the mobile workforce bus may not know about that, but that does end up being immediate savings that are in their pocket. We also collaborate on doing referrals for the workforce and job training programs. We contributed about $100,000 this year towards having seats for the workforce program. For the WIOA Act, MOED, as well as community action agencies across the country must work together by federal mandate.
I think you're right on. Though I represent a workforce agency, I will acknowledge that it's a 39-foot traveling billboard. And when we pull in someplace, residents will wander up and have, they'll ask about workforce, but they'll often ask about other services as well. Because often people are not, they don't just have one thing. And I think that we absolutely, as a city, should be thinking about the mobile center as something beyond workforce. I think workforce is important, but whether it's cleanliness of a neighborhood, whether it's youth activities, rec and parks, whatever it is. We've piloted some things. I think, again, this has just been around for about a year, but I think we should be thinking about it differently, or bigger, let's say it that way.
Okay. And let's continue that conversation, because I think it's important, again, and the other thing I'll add about it, and just one critique, I've actually been on the center. When it first arrived, one of the things that me and actually my staffer sitting in the back did was literally go and outreach to people. There was a lot of, in at least one of the neighborhoods, there was some skepticism that there may or may not be a police officer waiting on the bus, among others. Folks were just distrustful as to, why am I walking on this thing? Where did it come from? It has a big city logo. What's waiting on me on the other side? And so we literally were going with flyers to drag young men and women over to the bus to reassure them that this was a thing that they should take part in. I know that staffing is sort of limited to being able to run the bus itself. Has there been any conversation about trying to, again, partner with either requesting additional support for the bus so there is an outreach component when you're in a neighborhood so that people come over to it, or partnering with community-based organizations in an area so that, if you're going to be in Irvington, you're reaching out to My Brother's Keeper. If you're on Edmondson Avenue, you're reaching out to the Connection Center, or trying to get someone else that their job is to do sort of that hand-holding and walking people over. I found it to be effective. I mentioned in a previous hearing, we had one of your staffers from the Yo Center out doing a pop-up resource fair with me, and he had almost 40 sign-ups in a 3.5-hour period, and a lot of that was literally dragging people over to the tent, of which once they came over, they were first they were I don't know what that's all about. And then once we got that conversation going, people were eager to sign up for help. Is that something that is being considered, that you've tried? And if not, what would it take to accomplish something like that so there's a more aggressive outreach when the center is in a location?
So I think we're trying to think of it as sort of a hub and spoke. And so the mobile center is not, though it's called mobile center, it really isn't good for driving continuously. It's good to drive someplace and plant, and then to send the staff out. So we've done that with some of our VRI work. I've sort of planted the center and then the mobile center, and then having staff go out to knock on doors, drop flyers. With our Yo team, for example, a newer strategy, a brand new strategy, is for the Yo team to know where the center is going to be. They don't actually have to literally be on the bus. They can just get themselves to, let's say, Edmondson Village, and then use that center as a way to, as a home base. And then to go out and, for Yo, they're looking for 18 to 24-year-olds. Talk to them. They can come on the center to do more work. But to your point, yes, use it as a way to attract people and bring them on for more intensive services. But there's more that could be done, there's no doubt.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Schleifer?
Hey, so Councilman Burnett asked part of my my request to you guys. So sometimes we were aware of when the truck was coming to our district, sometimes we weren't. I know most of us here have a large network, whether it's social media, email, et cetera. So if we can know a couple days in advance, or even if you want to monthly send out the schedule or however you have it, I think we could all be an asset in getting it out to the right community. So if you tell us where it's going to be, just like when we have utility notifications, we always send it to the neighboring, associations and other groups within that region of our district. So just letting us know will only help your efforts.
Yes, we'll absolutely do that. And we've worked with each of you. When you have events, if you let us know, if we can arrange our schedule for the mobile unit to be there, if it's appropriate, we'll do that.
Yeah, and that's been helpful, and we enjoy working with you. I know a couple times I've driven through the district and I've just seen it places, and I'm like, oh, if only I knew before, I could have sent it to some of those operators there. The other question I have for you is regarding the cyber attacks. Also, you had mentioned that you're on a separate server, and you guys have a couple servers. So, did BCIT offer you any outside help about how to protect your systems moving forward?
Yes, and we have our IT director who's in constant communication. Though we're not directly impacted, we have been on both the morning and the afternoon calls, and we have used the unfortunate incident as a I hate to say it this way, but it's sort of a teachable moment to make sure that all of our security updates are in place and that our team is knowledgeable about what would happen.
So what kind of assistance did they offer you for moving forward to protect your systems? You want to come up to the mic if you don't mind?
Terry Parker, MOED. They provided us with a flash drive, and on that flash drive was some information that would be placed on our system in order to prevent any viruses that would be coming through. So they did give us that.
So what kind of like software was in that flash
I
drive?
can't tell you the exact software, but we can get you that information. But they did provide us a flash drive with software.
Right. And so are you guys responsible for covering the cost of whatever that program cost to roll out onto your system?
We were asked to put that flash drive and the information that's there and store that onto our server. That was all that we were asked to do at this point.
Okay, so can you get us the names of whatever that security software or system that they asked you to utilize, what the name of that is?
I will.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And what about you guys? Were you offered any IT stuff?
Yes, so the Mayor's Office of Human Services, I believe last week, the Redwood location did receive that information, and they are back online. So they did work with them with being able to get their email systems back up and checking all those sites. We are on a schedule to get the other sites up and running, 3 of our centers, as well as the Head Start office as well. So we have an agency IT specialist, and we did an inquiry to have that person trained so that it could expedite the process for us to get back up and running.
And so is that person setting up any new systems for you guys to protect your system?
So he will have a meeting with BSIT to be able to look into that, to see what is needed. He's also looking at that for our laptops because we are in the field quite a bit.
Gotcha. So for right now, you haven't spoken to them about that?
Not yet.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Henry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I read a long time ago that in every organization there's 2 kinds of people. There's the people that cut the wood and the people that hand you the saw. So I want to thank you guys for cutting some wood, especially in parts of the city where we really need that wood cut. Following up on my colleague's point about how basic some equity issues are, and that they shouldn't require a complicated study in order to implement them, there's one particular very obvious issue of equity that I feel has been ignored for a long time. My colleague from the 5th District points this out on a semi-annual basis, that his district has no rec center. In a city with 14 council districts and 40-some rec centers, for a district to not have any is an obvious inequity. I was under the impression there were 5 community action partnership centers, is that correct? Yes. Okay, but there's none in West Baltimore?
No. Our locations are in the northern area where we share an
Right.
office with you all, Park Heights, Cherry Hill, the Oliver Center where we just moved to Chase Street. So we're still on the east side there, and southeast.
So when there was one on Pennsylvania Avenue, there were 6.
Correct.
And by an extraordinary coincidence, there used to be 6 councilmatic districts. I would submit, and this is for the budget department as much as it's for any of the existing agencies, that we live in a city that used to be divided into 6 council districts and is now divided into 14 council districts. But when we changed those lines back in 2004, it does not feel like every agency made a point of readjusting how it thought about the city to deal with that new reality. So I know you have 5. Jason, how does MOED look at the city in terms of territories?
So that's a great question. So we have 2 one-stop centers. We've got a satellite center on Bush Street, and then we've got 2 Yo centers, and we've got 2 buildings in Old Goucher that one of them is the Workforce Reception Center that serves residents who are on temporary cash assistance. The other is a youth services building that has some direct services, but also is a bit of a youth admin building. But what I think we're moving to, because we recognize that a couple things. One is that large centers are expensive, and for us, quite honestly, may not be necessary to the extent that we can find a community partner. So we've moved to a community job hub model. So for example, we have one in Govans, and that's where we send staff people on our payroll, on city budget, who will go to that community organization and provide workforce services for free to them. And we're trying to find places to go where there's high traffic, right? Because it just makes sense. I would say to the council or to anyone else, like, we're open to knowing other places to go and create a community job hub. Because I do think that it makes a lot of sense for residents. Again, if they want to come, they can start at our Govans location or at the Govans location. I shouldn't say our Govans location. And if they need more comprehensive services, certainly they can go to the American Job Center, whichever one's more convenient for them. But a lot of times we can, a staff person with a laptop on their back in 2019 that can access the internet can provide all kinds of great services.
You want to
Yes.
jump in?
Yes, sir. To answer your question, that was a big issue for me taking on this role 6 months ago, is our outreach and how do we interact with our constituents, our neighbors, citywide. And the first step was I hired an external person to actually deal with that issue, because people were unaware of the offices, but didn't know there was an Office of Civil Rights across the city, even myself, and I was here for quite some time. And then secondly, due to needing to have action plan because of a ransomware attack, we then partner with the community action centers. So we go once a week to 3 different community action centers on a weekly basis: the Cherry Hill location, the Parks Heights, North Baltimore, just as an initial to develop a presence in those neighborhoods, and then from there, we're actually developing a comprehensive plan to actually deal with this outreach issue. Because in reference to wage enforcement, one of our major victims are returning citizens and our immigrant neighbors and residents, as it relates to wage enforcement. And those populations are usually in the West and the South. And so right now we're assessing, trying to put together a comprehensive plan to address your question about the different districts here in the city.
So Mr. Chairman, I think the request I would like to make is really technically of the Budget Bureau, perhaps operating in concert with the Department of Real Estate. I think it would be a useful thing for this committee to receive a list of city-owned buildings that have available office space divided by council district, so that each council person can see where there already are potential assets and places for operations like MOED and Community Action Partnership and Civil Rights, and any other city entity that is trying to do outreach into communities. We should be able to work with them and say, well, here is some space.
Councilman, love where you're going. 10 words or less, please.
It's challenging, but I appreciate the way that you require me to focus.
It's a mental exercise.
Yes, I like I said, I appreciate that.
So
we needed. Oh,
Can I tell you a little about something that we are working on that might get to that? But to your point, I mean, we can help coordinate that. It's a combination of also DGS and the planning department, because they see a lot of the building assets come through the capital budget for requests for repairs or new buildings. Or one of the things that we've been talking with both DGS and planning about, and other agencies, is, you know, the city has changed considerably since a lot of these buildings were first built. Kind of taking a step back and doing an inventory of where buildings are, what the utilization is, what's the square footage, what's the condition of the building, and kind of trying to map out what does the city look like from a fixed asset perspective, you know, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. I suspect, I don't know this until we put all the data together, I suspect that we have a lot of agencies that have kind of traditionally operated in a silo that might have, there might be opportunity for shared spaces.
Right.
I think of things like libraries and rec centers, you could combine some of that. Even industrial uses like DPW, DOT, yards, or fleet, some of those could be combined. So we are working with DGS and planning to get some outside support to try to do that analysis. In the meantime, we are gathering the data on where our buildings are, including some of these types of centers. And I know DGS and planning has started to gather that information for us, so we can see if an outside consultant could help us with that and do an analysis. We can share with you what we have so far on that, since we are coordinating that effort.
that is exactly what I want. I just want to be clear that for our purposes, it's easier for us to help you with that if you give us that information divided by council district.
Yes, once we get it, I think we should be able to pretty easily kind of split it that way.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So are we doing the request?
Yeah, so I can take that one down since Jeff is not here, but we'll coordinate the data that we've collected so far.
Can you summarize that for me?
In 10 words or less? Can I?
See, this is where I get stuck, right?
Consolidate all.
I'm not going to yell at you if you get to 12 or 13, but when we get to 300 or 400, then it gets difficult.
He's like a really kind checkout cashier, you know?
Yeah, so we'll consolidate all the building information that we have by district, essentially.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there, colleagues, any other questions? All right. Jason and all, thank you for everything that you guys are doing for the city and for our residents. We appreciate it. We're now in recess. We will be back at 6:30 p.m.